fighting all the time when I was a kid,
Yeah,
so
for
I
sure.
like did what I could, and what I could do was karate because that was what was there. So I did that. Luckily, I did that because then when it was time to hit somebody, it cracked somebody.
Broke brick.
Yeah, I was breaking brick on people.
What's some of the worst injuries you've seen of your whole time coming up? And I know you've seen some grisly shit.
Man, yeah, like one time it was my friend Sean Sullivan. Actually, this was like, man, must have been 20-some years ago, King of the Cage. It was funny because right before the fight, like we were showing him heel hooks, and then he hit this guy with a heel hook, and it like spiral fractured his tibia.
Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Dan Black. When you're going into one of these fights, right, you're at a high level. Like, all eyes are on this guy. You're the trainer. Like, so what kind of things do you get them prepared? How do you get them prepared for the fight?
We train twice a day, every day. 5-6 days a week. So
how many hours a day? All day long?
6 days, right? 6 hours. It's 2-3 hour sessions, 5 days a week, and then they're supposed to do their own thing on weekends. Like as far as conditioning stuff goes, I'll work with them on weekends when I don't have a fight. But it seems like I've had a fight every weekend for the past like 2 months. So the guys that have stuff coming up, they're expected to go do their 5-mile run or go do their conditioning stuff. But and the training is gonna obviously vary because MMA, you have so many variables. You know what I mean? So it's like, are we fighting a wrestler? Are we fighting a boxer? And so we do train semi-sport specific based on our opponent. But at the same time, like you could have your guy drop out the week before the fight, 10 days out from the fight, and then now all of a sudden you're fighting a completely different guy, completely different style. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're like, it's like a fresh slate. You're like, what do I do here? You got to like put your whole technique together, what you're going to do, your strategy and things.
Yeah. So and I've had that happen, a bunch of times where like we're training a whole camp, we're like, okay, we're going to dedicate 8-10 weeks to just, breaking down this guy. And like, we have this guy's all his fights and we have like the perfect game plan to beat that guy. And then like, a week or two out, oh, he got hurt, and now we're fighting someone completely different. So while you do want to, be familiar with your opponent and do as best you can to train for that specific opponent, you also have to, be ready to fight somebody else completely different style at the drop of a hat, So you want to try to get good at everything. You want to be well-rounded, you know what I mean? And these days you have to work everything. You got to train wrestling, you have to train your jiu-jitsu, you got to train your Muay Thai and your boxing, and you're going to try to see things in the guy that you're fighting that you want to exploit, but at the same time you don't want to get so focused on just that guy because there's always a chance that guy can drop out. All of a sudden, you're trying to fight a boxer that doesn't know how to check kicks, and now you're fighting a wrestler that's going to take you down when you kick. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
The whole strategy can change in a week. So it makes things interesting.
How much is the difference from when you're going into one of these fights and versus them winning versus losing when they're coming away from the cage? The morale, everything, it's like completely different, right?
Yeah. Obviously we don't come to lose, but it happens sometimes, and so, if when you're going in there, you're always, thinking win, and you're also, for me, I'm trying to think of how not to lose too, right? Because, but at the same time, stuff happens, if your guy loses, it's a matter of, keeping their morale up enough where it's like, sometimes it'll be a decision loss and it's like, hey, the judges, didn't see it your way. Sometimes it'll be a split, right? And then you want to keep them motivated. So you're like, hey, at least one judge got it right. You really won that,
Was there ever a time where you thought they really won? Was there ever a time?
Yeah. I used to yell at the judges like, what the hell are you guys watching. You know, that's a problem in MMA is the judging, because a lot of the judges, you know, I don't necessarily think fighters should be the one judging, because I know a lot of fighters have, you know, kind of a bias based on their style, right? They were a
Favoritism.
boxer, so they're yeah, you know, it's a kind of unconscious bias, I think, you know what I mean? But you know, a guy that wrestled in high school is probably going to be favoring the wrestling more than someone who boxed, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you know, and that's something that I always tried to do was you know, talk to the judges after if I didn't agree with their scores, and try to see why they judged things the way they did. You know, I remember one time I asked a judge, it wasn't my guy, you know, I was just watching the fight, and it was like a really, really, really close round. And the guy had a guy in a Kimura, like really deep, right? And so to me, I was like, man, like that almost kind of swings it for him, because like he was so close to breaking the guy's arm, right? But the guy gets the bell rung, you know what I mean? And this was a long time ago, but you know, I asked one of the judges, like, hey, how do you score that when it's like that close to being finished with the Kimura? And he looks at me, he's like, what's a Kimura? I'm just like, what the fuck?
Oh, so
You
he
know?
doesn't even know
He didn't
some
even
of this
he
stuff.
didn't even know no, he didn't even know the submission. You know, it's like, wait a second, how are you judging if you don't know what you're looking at? You know what I mean? I think it's gotten better over the years now. You know, and I think something good that's happened lately is they don't score the fight on takedowns. Back in the day, they used to, like, I think they almost used to count takedowns. So you could be winning the fight striking, you could be winning the fight everything else, but if you took me down like 3 or 4 times, you'd win the fight on takedowns, right? And now they've looked at it as like, okay, a takedown, unless it's like a huge slam that actually hurts you, like a takedown's nothing more than a change in position.
What about a
You know what I
punch?
mean?
What if you get punched and you
Well, yeah, no, and I mean, like, that should score different. I think if it's actually like a knockdown, like where I hit you and you dropped, you know what I
yeah,
mean, versus a slip or you're off balance, you know, I think that should score different.
yeah,
And I think it does. You know what I mean? It's fights in general. The first criteria of fighting should be damage, right? So if I'm throwing shots and I'm damaging you, that should take precedence over, you know, position or anything else, really. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Same thing with the takedown, right? If you take me down with, like, you know, a single leg or a body lock or something, but there's no real impact, and you land in my guard, and then I'm throwing up submissions on you, you know, like, to me, that's your takedown. I guess it should kind of count, but it shouldn't be counted, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, you got 5 takedowns, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
you won, right? I think a thing in America too is, like, they don't score bottom enough, you know. So, like, you know, in Japan and places like that where the judges are more educated, like, I could win the fight from the bottom. Like, if I'm on bottom in America, you're probably losing the fight. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Even
yeah.
if you're throwing up submissions, even if I'm the one throwing elbows, it seems like in America you still have that perception of, oh, whoever's on top's the guy winning. You know, and that's
What's the
sometimes the
chances of
case.
them changing the way they judge the fights?
I think it's gonna no, it's been progressively changing. You know, it's so much different now than it was back in the day. You know, they started making progress. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. They started being like, okay, well, like, if most of the round is a striking round, and then the round should be judged as a striking round, right? So if I spend 4 minutes and 30 seconds lighting you up, and then you take me down at the last second, you shouldn't win the round on that. Whereas back in the day, that's what used to happen, right? I could be beating you up for most of the fight, and then you get a takedown, you get mount, you throw a few punches,
You
right?
win.
But and then you'd win, right? But it's like, wait, you
Yeah.
only did that. You did that for 1 minute, and I beat you up for 4 minutes. So who really won the round? You know, it should be the whoever's kind of dictating the fight, right? That goes to ring generalmanship and whatnot. And like I said, there was a lot of bias, right? Because you know, back in the day, you know, UFC 1 through 5, like I said, was kind of like a jiu-jitsu marketing ploy, you know, but that got in a lot of people's heads of, like, that's how the fight should be scored for MMA, right? If I get it to the ground, I'm winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if you're not really doing anything from there, I think, yeah, if you finish them on the ground, then you should win. But, you know, things have changed a lot. You know, now they'll stand you up if it's boring. Back in the day, like, you had, you know, 30-minute fights that were boring, and they just let them keep going. You know, which for jiu-jitsu guys back in the day, that's what they want. They want a long fight, and because they figure it's just a matter of time before I'm going to get you or I'm going to wear you down. But people this is a spectator sport too, to a degree, right? So people don't want to watch people on the ground rolling around for like 40 minutes or an hour. Like,
Yeah, they want to see some
we
action, man.
want action. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's some of the worst injuries you've seen of your whole time coming up? And I know you've seen some grisly shit.
Man, yeah, like one time it was my friend Sean Sullivan, actually. This was like, man, must have been 20 some years ago, King of the Cage. It was funny because right before the fight, like, we were showing him heel hooks, and then he hit this guy with a heel hook, and it like spiral fractured his tibia. So it was like the bones were like popping out of his calf, and that one was pretty nasty. His foot completely turned around the other way. You know what I mean? And it was probably one of the nastiest leg injuries that I've seen. I've seen a bunch of guys get knocked out so bad, they're like looking like life support on the way out on a board. So that's always scary. You've seen some ones that are pretty bad knockouts where the guys are all twitching and shit.
Yeah, I've seen some black, like some swelling on the face that was like, oh, is that real? Like, it looked fake.
Oh yeah. Those ones usually aren't too bad as far as real injury goes, but they look nasty. You get the guys with the hematomas that are, you got grapefruit growing out of the side of your head.
Do those ever split? Yeah, they can. Yeah. I've seen one guy too. His cauliflower ear got busted. Like, he got kicked, and then like half of his ear was like hanging off. There was that one fight in the UFC where the guy's ear pretty much ripped off. So that stuff happens. To me, they just look gross. They're not, that dangerous. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, if you see someone with his leg completely snapped, like the Anderson Silva, when he broke his leg on Weidman, or Tyrone Spong did the same thing. Gokhan Saki, you've seen that one happen quite a bit, where the guys they're not setting up the low kick, and then they're not turning their hip right. And
so
they
if
go
you
to
watch
step
all of
on
those,
it. When they go to step on it, oh man.
Yeah, all of those have one thing in common, in that they didn't step right when they're throwing the kick. You can go back and watch the video. Every single one of those kicks that happened, the guy didn't step right, so the hip's not opening. So they're hitting with the side of their shin bone, which is the weak side. You know what I mean? And then also they're kicking the upper part of the shin right by the knee, which is
part of the bone,
super
right?
hard. Yeah, they're throwing super hard kicks, not setting it up right, and they're hitting like the hardest spot. So there are a few times where the person checking got their leg broke. Stan the Man Longinidis broke Dennis Alessio's leg back in the day, and Dennis was the one trying to check, but usually it's the kicker who gets their leg broken. Those ones are always, nasty. No one wants to see that, but it's part of the sport, so can happen.
So when Pat Miletich started the Pat Miletich fighting system and all of his stuff going on, how did that help the sport? It helped it a lot, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think because Pat was one of the first ones kind of like merging the arts together, right? Because he was good about marketing it and making it about himself, right? But ultimately, he's like, it's the Pat Miletich fighting system. It's fighting systems that already existed, but I'm just putting it together, my way. You know what I mean? So nothing wrong with that. I think every teacher. I mean, shit, I do the same stuff, right? Like, I started with boxing. I've done Muay Thai for a long time. I've, done jiu-jitsu long time. So, everyone kind of has their own system. I think ultimately we're all kind of doing the same thing, in that we take, different things from different arts and put it together, for me, and what's the highest percentage, you know what I mean? I try to show high percentage stuff, you know what I mean? Because, fighting is kind of a numbers game. Sometimes you'll get the low percentage stuff, like the spinning, jump spinning back kicks and stuff. Like, they can work, they're cool when they land, but the chances of you landing it are low. And then if you don't land it, you're probably in a fucked position. So
Thank you all for watching that interview. I'll be live in a little while, around 11 o'clock. So stay tuned. It's about to get real. Peace.
When I was